Okay, here is the Chapter 7 test review study key. For those of you that are trying to do this at home, we're going to match each property with the figure that best describes it. So I kind of put the answers here. I went through and tried to make this a little shorter than my last video, so I pre-answered a lot of these. But when we go through these definitions here on the right, we want to pick the one that is the most specific to that shape. So when I have both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, that's going to match up with a parallelogram because every one of these other shapes have some more specific properties. So A goes with 3. All sides congruent. Well, that's going to match up with a rhombus because even though a square also has all sides congruent, there's another property about a square that it has 4 right angles. So that one, the most specific, is going to match up with a rhombus, all sides congruent. Exactly one pair of parallel sides, that's going to match up with a trapezoid. Opposite sides are congruent and has 4 right angles. That matches up with a rectangle. 2 pairs of consecutive congruent sides with opposite sides not congruent. That is a kite. And then 4 right angles and all side congruent is a square. So here's the answers that match up with that. Okay, the next part says, explain the purpose of the following formulas. When would you use it? To find the number of sides, the interior angle, the sum of the interior angles, the exterior angle, or what? So this one, n minus 2 times 180. Remember that's when we made the triangles by connecting the vertices, and every polygon always had 2 less triangles than it did the number of sides. That's why we subtract 2. And that was to find the sum of the interior angles. This next one, once we find the sum, because if you look at the top part of this equation, the top is just finding the sum. And then we divide by how many angles there are, or number of sides, and we get each interior angle. This only works on a regular polygon. The last one, 360 divided by n, this is finding each exterior angle, because the sum of the exterior angles is always 360, and I divide by how many angles there are, which is the same as the number of sides, and that will give me each exterior angle. Okay, the next part says, calculate the sum of the interior angles of the following polygons. So a nonagon is a 9-sided figure. And so I'm going to take 180 times 7. I always have to subtract 2. So 180 times 7, let's see if I can do this a little bit better here, is 1260. Okay, the next one is a 14-sided polygon. So I'm going to take 180 times 12. When I do that, I get 2160. Then the last one is a 25-gon, so I'm going to take 180 times 23, and I get 4140. Okay, the next one, calculate each interior angle measure of the following polygons. So a 50-gon means I'm going to take 180 times by 48, because it's 180 times n minus 2, and then divide by how many sides there are, so that's 50. So it looks like this. Now notice, that's just this formula right up here. I had 50 sides, so that's where I got 48 was n minus 2, and I divided by 50. That told me each interior angle. So that comes out to be 172.8. For a 12-gon, I'm going to take 180 times 10 and divide by 12. And that gives me 150. And then for a 99-gon, follow the same pattern, 180 times 97 divided by 99. And I get 176.4. Okay, each interior angle of a regular polygon is equal to 160 degrees. Determine the number of sides of the polygon. There's 2 ways that I can solve this. I can either use this formula right up here, because that's what equals each interior angle, and I can set that equal to 160 since each interior angle is 160. That's kind of hard to solve for n that way. It's doable and something we all know from algebra, but there's an easier way. If we have a polygon, I'm just going to kind of sketch one right here. Okay, and the interior angle is 160. I can find the linear pair, the exterior angle, which would be 20. And to find the number of sides, I can just take 360 divided by 20. Okay, because that's going to tell me how many sides there are. If all of these are 20 all the way around, I have 1, 2, 3. Well, this is going to be, however, we had to find out how many times 20 goes into 360. So I'm going to take 360 and divide by 20. So I did my work here. I said each exterior angle is 20. This is the 20, by the way, which was 180 minus 160. Sorry, I did that kind of quickly. So I took 360, divided it by 20, and I got 18. That's a little bit easier to solve than doing it this way up here. But you can choose whichever way makes sense to you. So I did it the same on 11. Each interior angle is 172. So I took 180 and subtracted 172 to find out what the corresponding exterior angle was, or the adjacent exterior angle. And then I took 360 divided by 8, and I found out that it's a 45-sided polygon. You can see that makes sense because up here a 50-sided polygon had a 172.8 degree angle. A 45-sided polygon had 172. So that makes sense. Okay. Okay, this one says, try to cover up my answer here, but it's not working too well. Calculate the measure of each exterior angle of a 40-sided regular polygon. So I take 360, divide by 40, and I got 9 degrees. Calculate the measure of each exterior angle of a 90-sided polygon. Let's follow the same pattern. Take 360, divide by 90, and I get 4 degrees. Okay, number 14. If the measure of each exterior angle of a polygon is 15 degrees, how many sides does the polygon have? I just take 360 and divide it by 15, and that gives me 24 sides. Solve for the perimeter of the kite. Show your work. Now this one I didn't do beforehand, but I kind of set it up here. So we need to do the Pythagorean theorem on this because I have a right triangle right here. And the missing length is my hypotenuse. So I can take 24 squared plus 10 squared equals x squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem. And then 24 squared is, I don't know this by heart, so I have to use my calculator, 576 plus 100 equals x squared. So 676 equals x squared. And then I need to square root both sides in order to get x by itself. So the square root of 676 is 26. So this length right here is 26, which means, since this is a kite, that this length is also 26, because remember that consecutive sides are congruent. Okay, well, I'm supposed to find the perimeter, so I got 2 more sides to find here. And I notice I have another right triangle here since the diagonals of a kite meet at a 90-degree angle. So I can say 45 squared, I'm going to write it over here, 45 squared plus 24 squared equals y squared. I named this one y just because I named that one x, and since they're different numbers, I chose a different variable. So 45 squared is 2025 plus 24 squared is 576 equals y squared. And then I'll take 2025 plus 576, and I get 2601. And if I'm trying to find the square root of that number, then I can take the square root of 2601 and I get 51. So y equals 51. So this is 51 and so is this. So perimeter, if you remember, is just the outside length. It's like if I had to put a fence around this shape, how much fencing would I need? So I'd go 51 plus 51 plus 26 plus 26, and I get the perimeter equals 154, and it's in inches. Okay, the next is just some vocabulary, so we'll just go through it. Opposite angles in a parallelogram are always congruent. The diagonals of any parallelogram bisect each other, so that's every parallelogram. It's not true of a kite. A kite only bisects, the short diagonal. It's not true of a trapezoid, so it's parallelogram. Supplementary adjacent angles are known as a linear pair. If two angles are complementary, then the sum of their measures is 90 degrees. Remember C for corner. Complementary, C means corner, and 90 degrees makes a corner. The sum of the measures of the exterior angle of any polygon is always 360. Consecutive angles in a parallelogram sum to 180. Consecutive means next to. A regular polygon always has equal sides and angles. Okay, find the value of each variable in the parallelograms below. So let's look at this one first. If this is a parallelogram, that means that this side is congruent to this angle. This angle is congruent to this angle. And we know that consecutive angles in a parallelogram, if you look up here, we just answered it, sum to 180. So I can say that 3a plus a equals 180. And then, so skip this step over here for just a minute. So if I combine 3a and a, I get 4a equals 180. Divide both sides by 4. So a is 45. So if this is 45, this angle is 3 times 45, which is 145. And opposite angles are congruent of a parallelogram, so B is 145 degrees. Okay, this one, the diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent, so this is congruent to this, and this one is congruent to this. I said that wrong. The diagonals of a parallelogram are not congruent, they bisect each other. That means I can set this equal to that. 2b plus 4 equals b plus 7. And then I subtracted b from both sides, and I subtracted 4 from both sides. And I got b equals 3. So if b equals 3, right here, that solves that equation. Now a, the reason why I can just say a equals 7 is because this is congruent to that. So a has to equal 7. Okay, 24. So the midpoint of a trapezoid is always going to be 1/2 the base 1 plus base 2. So if I take 31 plus 19 and divide it by 2, I get 25. Okay, this one, I notice here first that 43 to 34, that's 9, a difference of 9. So I can subtract 9 from 34 to get x equals 25. Because we want 34 to be the middle number between 43 and x. So I can find out the difference here is 9, so the difference here has to also be 9 to make it the middle number. Okay, we have kite, RSTV, find angle V. Now remember on a kite that these angles right here are congruent, because these two sides are congruent and these two sides are congruent. So where the two different sides meet up are where my congruent angles are. So if S is 75, then V is also 75. Now the question doesn't ask it, but we can also find angle T because the sum of the four angles in a quadrilateral have to be 360. So I can find out T is 130 because I go 75 plus 75 plus 80 and subtract that number from 360. Okay, this is also a kite. So here are my two congruent angles, so I can call them X. They're the same, so I'll call them both X. So I can go 60 plus 104 plus X equals 360 because the sum of the interior angles of a quadrilateral is 360. So it looks like this. And then I solve for X. I get X equals 98. And if I go too fast on some of these steps, feel free to pause the video and try it yourself and see if you can match up your answers with mine. Okay, find the value of X and the measure of each interior angle. So on this one, it's a pentagon. So I need to take 180 times 3 because the pentagon is 5 sides. So I always times it by 2 less. And that's 540. So if I add all of these measures together, so notice I just went around the circle, 3x plus 3x plus 5x plus 10 plus 5x plus 10 plus 7x plus 14 equals 540. Gather all my x's together and I get 23x. And then I had 10 plus 10 plus 14, so that's 34. Subtract 34 from both sides. 23x equals 506, so x equals 22. And once I found that x is 22, I just go plug 22 in. So to find angle A, I plugged it in right there. To find angle B, I plugged it in right there, and so on. But I noticed that B and E were the same, so I just went ahead and copied 66 down to there. Okay, find the value of x. So these are all exterior angles. The sum of the exterior angles of any polygon is 360. So I have x plus 2x plus 3x plus 4x equals 360. So 10x equals 360. Divide both sides by 10 and I get 36. Really, to use this right, you should have tried these all on your own, and then if you got one of them wrong, then you can watch the video. So I know I'm going kind of quickly, but that's how I hope you're using this to study. Give the most specific name of the quadrilateral. All this shows me is that the two diagonals bisect each other. I don't know if the angles are right angles. I don't know if the sides are the same. It doesn't tell me anything about that. So all I can say is that it's a parallelogram. This one has 4 right angles. I don't know if the sides are the same. It certainly doesn't look like it. So it is a rectangle. And this one, all 4 sides are the same. Don't know anything about the angles. To be a square, they'd have to be 90. Since it doesn't say that, it's a rhombus.